The Book of Enoch, Judaism and Christianity. The Book of Enoch is like the mysterious offbeat cousin of the Bible. Many people know about it, but it's usually kept outside the family reunions of Judaism and Christianity books. This ancient text, dating from around 300 BCE to 100 CE, is linked to Enoch, the great-granddad of Noah, our famous boat builder. It's practically mythical, partly because it didn't make the cut for the standard Jewish and Christian Bibles, yet despite being left out, it still managed to sneak in and leave a few fingerprints on early Jewish and even Christian ideas. Essentially, the Book of Enoch dives into wild supernatural territory, closer to your favorite sci-fi movie plot. It tells how angels, known as the Watchers, descended from heaven to mingle too closely with humans. According to Enoch, these angels fell for human women, creating a race of giants called the Nephilim. As you can imagine, things got chaotic. Violence, mayhem, and giant beings causing havoc. Naturally, God wasn't thrilled with the chaos and ordered a cosmic cleanup, including a massive flood. Here comes the Noah's Ark sequel, one of the Bible's greatest stories. One of its key themes is divine judgment, which feels like a sneak peek at some New Testament ideas about the end times and the messianic prophecy. Because of that, it's often quoted in Christian texts, even though it didn't make it into the official canon. But it was left out because some religious authorities thought its themes were too strange or speculative. Let's just say the intense focus on angels and the supernatural didn't exactly scream mainstream. Although it didn't make the Bible cut, the Book of Enoch still lives on, especially in Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, where it's considered sacred. The life of Adam and Eve, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Imagine being a biographer known for writing stories about people, and you're transported to when Adam and Eve were still the only humans on Earth. So you decide to follow their pursuits while making a book out of their daily lives. Instead of the Kardashians, you're keeping up with the most famous biblical couple. This is what the life of Adam and Eve was all about. It's not part of the Bible or Quran, but seen as an apocryphal text, meaning it's hidden or left out of official religious books. This story dives into the lives of Adam and Eve after they're expelled from Eden, and life wasn't exactly a bed of roses for them after they were banished. In this narrative, Adam and Eve grapple with the stark realities of their new human lives: hunger, toil, and the pang of regret. Adam, burdened by remorse over disobeying God, immerses himself in the Jordan River, seeking penance. Eve, equally heartbroken by the loss of paradise, joins him. It's not your typical couples spa retreat because they go through days of fasting and weeping, hoping for some cosmic forgiveness. Amid this suffering, the archangel Michael appears, offering them a glimmer of hope. He shares that redemption will one day be within reach for their descendants. However, this is far from a Disney fairy tale because Satan soon enters, boasting about his role in their fall. Driven by jealousy, he reveals he resented humanity's favored place, leading him to sabotage their innocence. So rather than a simple path to peace, Adam and Eve find themselves entangled in a cosmic drama of envy, fall, and a distant promise of redemption. In the end, the life of Adam and Eve mirrors how people have wrestled with human suffering and the hope for redemption across religions. It paints Adam and Eve as more than just the first sinners, but basically ancient reality TV stars, filled with regret, love, and a desire to make things right, just minus the camera crew and product placements. The Gospel of Thomas, Christianity. Let's say you're Thomas, and looking to set yourself apart from the other apostles who write stories about Jesus and his adventures. So you decide to be Christ's official stenographer by writing everything he says, including his sleep-talking episodes. That's essentially what the Gospel of Thomas is about. Found in 1945 among the Nag Hammadi manuscripts in Egypt, it's considered a sayings gospel, basically a collection of quotes and teachings from Jesus, rather than a traditional narrative with a plot. Picture it as a spiritual soundboard, where Jesus' words are gathered in a straightforward list, rather than the adventure-filled stories we find in the canonical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Think of it as the ancient world's version of the best quotes section of Goodreads. What sets Thomas apart is its emphasis on inner enlightenment and self-discovery, leading into the mystical side of Jesus' teachings. It has 114 sayings, many familiar, but there are some twists. For example, while traditional Gospels emphasize faith in God, Thomas frequently encourages believers to seek within to find divine truth. Basically, it's Jesus giving a big thumbs up to ancient introspection, or as we'd say today, find your Zen. Because of this inward focus, some scholars detect a bit of Gnostic vibe in Thomas. Gnosticism Gnosticism was an ancient religious movement emphasizing personal spiritual knowledge over external teachings or institutions. Picture it as the DIY spiritual kit of early Christianity, which made some church leaders see Thomas as a bit of a rebel. This unorthodox flair kept it out of the accepted canon for centuries, giving it an intriguing, lost gospel vibe. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Christianity. Reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is like watching an episode of Marvel's What If, because it offers an alternate view of well-established biblical stories. It offers a unique perspective that Mary Magdalene is credited with. In this Gospel, Magdalene is close to Jesus and portrayed as a leading figure among the disciples. It's a bit like finding out that the supporting character everyone thought was a sidekick is the main character. It's as if Robin turned out to be the real hero of the story the entire time. In this puzzle, Mary takes on the role that shakes up traditional ideas of hierarchy within the early church. She receives special teachings from Jesus after his resurrection and shares these insights with the other disciples. But the juicy part is that Peter isn't exactly happy about Jesus playing favoritism. Picture a bit of a biblical power struggle, with Peter giving Mary the ultimate "who made you boss" look. The text itself was discovered in fragments, mostly Coptic manuscripts from the 5th century, but the story could have originated even earlier, in the 2nd century. Unfortunately, much of the text is missing, leaving readers to piece together the narrative like a historical jigsaw puzzle. This gospel is hidden because the early church leaders wanted to keep things streamlined, and perhaps didn't like the idea of a female disciple in a prominent teaching role, and maybe because the gospel also suggests there was something steamy going on between Christ and Magdalene, making Jesus look like any other man who can fall prey to a femme fatale. The Apocalypse of Abraham, Judaism. Imagine being Abraham, and God feels a bit more generous than usual. He allows you to take a peek behind the cosmic curtain to see what's really going on in heaven, like getting a short backstage pass to the universe's inner workings. And that's where things get a bit too wild. The story starts with Abraham doubting the gods of his father's household, basically idols made of wood and stone. This frustration leads him on a spiritual journey. He is eventually chosen by God, the big G himself, because he was bold enough to reject his father's gods. Abraham went on a visionary trip where he's shown all sorts of wild, symbolic scenes about the fate of the world, human sin, and the end times. Along the way, he's guided by an angel named Yahel, who's basically Abraham's celestial tour guide and something of a heavenly mentor. As Abraham ascends to the higher realms, he finds himself caught in the heart of a cosmic clash between forces of good and evil, an ultimate supernatural showdown, minus the popcorn. Among the intense sights, he encounters a vision of humanity's sins, depicted through ominous creatures and spirits. Through these revelations, God unveils the struggle between faith and idolatry, stressing a powerful message about loyalty to Him alone. It's like a divine proclamation that there can only be one, setting a clear boundary against worshiping other gods. Then comes perhaps the most dramatic part, a vision of the end times. Abraham glimpses a future where a select few are saved, while others face judgment, a scene reminiscent of a movie trailer for a film still in the works, with each vision blending both dark warnings and glimmers of hope for his descendants. It was the ultimate coming soon, showing Abraham the stakes and significance of staying true to his faith. The Apocalypse of Abraham didn't make the cut for the religious bestseller list, but it's still a gem because it talks about Jewish thoughts on sin, salvation, and the end of days. Think of it as the ancient director's cut that reveals more of the cosmic drama behind the scenes. The Gospel of Barnabas, Islam and Christianity. Let's say you're Barnabas, Paul the Apostle's BFF. You decide to write a gospel, but instead of crafting a nice, uplifting story that'll bring everyone together, you somehow spark a religious debate, more intense than who gets the last slice of pizza at a potluck. This gospel of yours isn't your typical account, but is like the alternate take on some of the events in the Bible, and it's got people talking. In this version, Jesus isn't portrayed as the Son of God. Instead, he's described as a prophet, which aligns with Islamic beliefs. It even goes as far as Jesus name-dropping the Prophet Muhammad, like a divine shout-out to announce the coming of a new savior. Imagine the stir that would cause when Jesus did a wrestling promo and introduced Muhammad as the next big thing. This gospel also claims that Jesus wasn't actually crucified. Instead, it suggests someone else took his place, an idea that matches the Islamic view, where Jesus gets a heavenly fast pass before the cross ordeal. Think of it as the ultimate game of switcheroo, with Jesus avoiding the crucifixion scene like a well-timed escape in a movie. It's an interesting twist, but not everyone's on board. The Gospel of Barnabas is intriguing, but it's about as widely accepted as pineapple on pizza. But the fact that it only appeared during medieval times and never during the early part of Christianity is the reason why scholars doubt its authenticity. With no solid historical documentation, people wonder if this text was penned with an agenda during medieval times, especially given the interactions between Islamic and Christian communities. In other words, was this gospel a genuine Barnabas OG or just a medieval remix? For Muslims, the text feels affirming, like finding a historical document that matches their narrative. It's a bit of a theological speed bump for Christians, since it doesn't align with the New Testament Gospels, so it's often set aside as a hidden text, something like an ancient blooper reel that didn't make the final cut of the Bible. The Book of Jubilees, Judaism and Christianity. If the Bible had a director's cut, then the Book of Jubilees would be part of the extended, uncut version everyone's waiting for, with all the deleted scenes and extra commentary. Jubilees fills in details and adds more backstory to the familiar tales from Genesis and Exodus. Thought to be written around the 2nd century BCE, this book offers a fresh, almost cinematic take on the early stories of humanity according to Jewish tradition. It didn't make the final cut of the mainstream Bible today, but back in the day it was all the rage. Jewish communities and even some early Christian groups were into it like it was the latest blockbuster. The main feature of Jubilees is how it retells the story of the Standard Bible by dividing it into Jubilees, or periods of 49 years. Like it's a limited edition DVD release you never knew existed. Each Jubilee unfolds with a structured account of events, as if history itself has its own episode guide. This way, events in the Bible get a sort of timeline makeover, almost like giving biblical history a calendar app that helps people see where they are in God's timeline. The book also gives some beloved biblical characters, like Abraham, Jacob, and Moses, a little more flair. Imagine Abraham as faithful and a man with insider knowledge of future events. In Jubilees, these characters are less like extras in a divine drama and more like they've got the script in advance, almost like they're on God's VIP list for key plot twists. While the Book of Jubilees didn't make the Bible's final cut, it's still cherished in some circles, especially within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So while it may not have the fame of a movie blockbuster, it definitely has a dedicated cult following. The Acts of Peter, Christianity. Let's say you're Peter the Apostle and are often just one of the side characters in Jesus' grand story, even though you probably deserve the Best Actor in a Supporting Role award. But the Acts of Peter is more like the spin-off to your story. This time you're the one in the leading role. Written in the late 2nd century, this text gives us an extra look at Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, after Jesus' resurrection. Unlike the more official Acts of the Apostles, which reads like an early church growth manual, Acts of Peter dives into Peter's journey. He ends up in Rome, ready for the ultimate showdown against Roman authorities and a certain sorcerer, Simon Magus. It was a battle that was less about Harry Potter and more about proving God's power, as Peter proved Simon to be a hoax sorcerer. The text also touches on Peter's life's dramatic, if bittersweet, end. When he was sentenced to crucifixion in Rome, he supposedly requested to be crucified upside down, feeling unworthy to die in the same way as Jesus. This upside-down crucifixion has since become an iconic symbol of Peter's humility and dedication, though the historical accuracy of this tale might be more upside down than we think. The Acts of Peter may not be part of the official Bible timeline, but it's still a fascinating story if you love your religious stories. It's packed with larger-than-life scenes and spiritual lessons that make you wonder if ancient writers missed out on Hollywood screenwriting careers. The Gospel of Judas, Christianity. You know that the Joker is the ultimate villain in Batman's storyline, but imagine a comic book where the story is told from the Joker's perspective. Suddenly, he's the misunderstood hero, fighting the good fight in a world that doesn't get him. That's essentially what the Gospel of Judas is. This book is one of those texts that reshuffles our understanding of early Christianity, like finding out Darth Vader had a soft side. Unlike the 4 traditional Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which cast Judas as the ultimate betrayer, the Gospel of Judas has him shining shining like an unlikely hero of the biblical story. Yes, the same Judas with the reputation of a double-crossing backstabber. In this text, Jesus has a private VIP conversation with Judas, considering him the only disciple who truly gets him. Jesus hints that his earthly body is cramping his style, and he needs to shed it to return to the spiritual realm. So Judas becomes the one to free Jesus from his physical limitations by handing him over to the authorities. Instead of betrayal, Judas's act is framed as a divine mission, almost like he's a celestial accomplice instead of a villain. This twist makes the Gospel of Judas an outlier among Christian texts because it flips our assumptions. It implies that Judas wasn't acting out of greed or betrayal, but had an insider role in fulfilling Jesus' destiny. Think of it as the ultimate rebranding campaign that didn't pass the PR department. Mainstream Christian leaders weren't exactly thrilled, dismissing it as heretical. And that's partly why the gospel didn't make it into the official Bible, as it was just a bit too plot twisty for what became Orthodox Christianity. The Testament of Solomon, Judaism and Christianity. The Testament of Solomon is the behind-the-scenes scoop on King Solomon's adventures with magic, demons, and building the Grand Temple of Jerusalem. Think of it as a mix between ancient history, spiritual instruction, and a supernatural adventure story. The story begins with King Solomon receiving a magical ring from the Archangel Michael. This isn't your typical piece of jewelry because this ring gives Solomon control over demons. It was as if he got a special Pokeball he could use to catch any Pokemon. But instead of friendly creatures, he was taming hell's offspring. Now you might wonder why Solomon, of all people, would need an army of demons. But with a temple to build and the looming costs of ancient stonework, he decided it'd be more economical to pull in a demon crew. Instead of hiring laborers, Solomon uses this ring to summon and command various demons, each with their special skills and eccentricities. But Solomon doesn't just enslave these demons, instead he goes full FBI interrogator on them. Each demon steps forward, introduces himself, brags about its powers, and even spills its weaknesses. It's almost like the first season of Demon Idol, except Solomon is the judge, and there's zero chance of anyone winning a recording contract. Through these interviews, he gets a crash course in demonology, all while getting his temple built. It was the best 2-for-1 special the ancient world had ever seen. While chatting with these demons, Solomon learns how to ward them off, which he diligently records. This makes for a handy ancient demon guidebook, perfect if you're concerned about uninvited guests from the dark side showing up at the dinner table. The Testament portrays Solomon as a wise king and a mystical figure who can harness dark forces for divine purposes, thanks to his faith and heavenly support. It didn't make it into the official Bible because religious leaders probably didn't like a famous figure using demons as his labor force. But if you're into folklore with a side of paranormal spice, this text is a hidden gem worth exploring.